Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Steve Hess, Director of User Experience at BOM. Welcome to today's webinar. I'd like to thank you all for joining. You could do me a favor, if any of you can hear me, please put something in the chat that you can hear me. Okay. Great. So I want to thank you for joining. Today's topic is BOM revisions and keeping track of them. There's quite a number of differing ways to approach this. So I'm going to present a series of methods that might help you get started, and then I'm very interested in hearing Q&A on the topic when we get to the end. So I think this conversation will continue on in other webinars or through the support channels. So let's get started. Hang on just a second. Okay, thank you. I'm now sharing the screen. Apologies. Okay. As I said, this webinar is intended to be 20 minutes or less. There will be a live demo at the end. This webinar is a little different than some others. It will be a little bit of a deeper dive into the mechanics of BOMs and revisions. I promise to try to keep it interesting and free of marketing material. So as we do with a couple of things with all the webinars, I'll be sharing out the content in this webinar this afternoon, as well as the video. And we also have a few definitions that I want to start with. A few of these are a little more important with this particular topic. So here we go. Some of these you'll recognize: bills of materials and part numbers and assemblies. What's a little bit unique here in this topic is that when I talk about Excel, in the context of Excel, I'm just talking about any spreadsheet. And I'm going to introduce you to the definition of revision, which is an immutable, particular immutable rendition of a single level BOM. I know that there's a lot there, but essentially what this means is it's a captured state of a particular assembly's BOM and not its sublevels, and it is immutable. In other words, it is unchanging. And then, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about work in progress. Work in progress is an area where the latest state of something is stored. It's not the latest revision. It's where the latest state of design is stored. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that as well. Also, a few assumptions that we're going to make here, and they are that you have a method for creating revisions of parts. I'm not going to dive into how that's done. Individual parts in an assembly, you may have CAD or a change control board or a paper process or anything for creating revisions of parts. We're just going to assume that revisions happen, and that you have a scheme for developing your revisions of ABC, whatever it might be. We're going to use 1, 2, 3 in the webinar, and again, that Excel is just some type of spreadsheet. What will we be covering in this webinar? Some basic principles of revisions, and we've just started discussing those. We're going to go into those a little bit more. We're going to talk about how revisions of BOMs appear in the structure and what happens when there's a BOM that has a sub-level bill of material and the relationship between, how does the Rev B of a particular item appear in the Rev C of an upper level item? How does that appear, and how do we manage that? We'll go through a live demo of some of the building a BOM with multiple levels and setting of revisions, and setting revisions of parts, creating a revision for a mid-level subassembly, and then creating a revision for a top level we're also going to look at a use case where, some mid-level subassembly has been revised, and how do we kind of incorporate that into the upper level. So once again, I'm going to bring back the skateboard. This has been a theme through all of our webinars. Webinar number 2, we introduced this idea. The skateboard is nice because it has a relatively few number of parts, but it has the structure that I'm looking for. Now I've simplified it even more for this example. If you go back and look at webinar 2, there's a couple of other things that appear in the level. What I'm specifically looking for in this level is, there is a top level assembly, a top level BOM. The skateboard, we'll refer to it as the board going through this. The deck and the axle and some screws and some nuts and wheels that go into the sub-assemblies. Those are the components we're going to use to kind of guide our discussion, and you can hopefully you can translate that into some of your own assemblies, or I'll be happy to work with you on separately through our support channel, support@openbom.com, if you have some questions. By the time at the end of this discussion today, we want to arrive at a place where we have a revision for a top level BOM. In this example, I've got revision 2, and I have some components or items that are shown in the BOM that appear at different revisions. In some cases, the deck's going to be at revision 2, the revision of the axle assembly will be at a later revision, revision 1 here. We assume that all revisions start sort of at revision blank, and that they're created out of some work that's done in an area called work in progress. This is the latest state of your design. There aren't any revisions present in work in progress. It is just kind of like coming together of all the latest designs. From work in progress, we're going to cast off revisions. So for those of you that are a little more thinking about this, a little more of a database structure, this is what latest looks like. If you think about it as a board and an axle and some leaf parts, that in more advanced webinars, we'll start to build on this structure when we get into more complicated assemblies. But that's the representation of this assembly. And then over there is the sort of the BOM, the product structure over on the right. So that should look familiar. So we've got the board, the deck, the screw, the axles, and the wheels. Okay, so I want to tell a little story here, just kind of as an example of what to illustrate what I'd like to bring to this webinar. And we're going to tell a story of Jack, who's building a skateboard, and he's got his work in progress BOM over on the left, and it has a board, deck, all the things that we're expecting. This could be in Excel or any other way of kind of describing this bill of material. He as I showed here in the middle, here's an image of what his Excel might look like, and he's done some work and he's set the revision for the deck to revision 1. Okay, so now he comes up, he moves up to the board, and he performs an operation called save revision. And save revision might be something sophisticated in a BOM management tool. It might just be saving a version of the BOM at read-only on your disk in Excel. So he performs a save revision. He gets the board at revision 1, the deck, which was already at revision 1. And then, as most of us know, screws, typically we don't revise at rev dash. Then he's got the axle sub-level, which he hasn't yet created a revision of. So it's going to appear in his board as shown, but none of the leaf parts are going to show. And so for right now, just kind of keep that in mind. There's an axle with no revision, and the revision structure is there on the right. So with that, he's got revision 1 of the board, revision 1 of the deck, screws, which are not revisions typically. Where I work, we call them rev dash, and the axle, which does not have a revision or is at no revision yet. So let's take a look at what that Excel might look like that he saved out for revision 1 of the board. So here we see that there's 3 items in there: the board, the screw, and the axle with no leaf parts, again, because it is not at any revision. This is really important, and I'm going to spend a couple of slides. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this topic. There's no structure of the axle subassembly yet because there's no revision of the axle. The reason for that is revision 1 of the board is immutable. We've already established that. It can't be changed. So you can't have any references to information in the Rev 1 of the board that is not yet revisioned. So when I look at Rev 1 of the board, this is how I'm going to see it. So let's continue on with our skateboard manufacturing process. Jack's co-worker, Kathy, now is tasked with updating the axle and creating a revision of the axle. Keep in mind that this is going to be a sub-level BOM of the board. So she opens the axle. She may just get the axle Excel spreadsheet. She may open it in OpenBOM or some other BOM management tool, and she makes a few changes. She gets the right size for the wheels and identifies the wheel as being revision 1 and sets the nut to rev dash. We've established we use that nomenclature for our hardware. And she creates a revision of the axle. At this point, the Rev 1 of the axle does exist, but it literally has no parent. As we remembered previously, revision 1 of the board was pointing to a non-revisioned state of the axle. So we've got axle Rev 1 is sort of sitting out here, waiting to be incorporated. The revision list is there on the right. So let's take a step back for just a moment and take a look at that process one more time. Let's think about these as the work in progress and the various revisions. And what I just want to draw your attention to here is that this circle here, in the left, this Rev 1, you might think of this as the axle, and the new version of it, Rev 2, exists, and we can see that until we come up here and create one more revision, and when we give the presentation just a chance to catch up here. So it's this act of going from R1 to R2 up here at the top level that causes the next revision of the axle to be brought in and saved. So the action here is we've updated the axle. It's spitting out here as a new revision. We need to create a revision of the upper level of the board and incorporate that change. Okay, we're going to do that. I'm going to do an example of that, and we'll see that. So finally, and by the way, this deck will be shared with everyone, and I'm happy to discuss it here online. So finally, Jack makes some final changes to the deck. He is going to change the revision of the deck to R2, and now he's ready to create revision 2. Okay. So Jack creates revision 2. We see that the axle now at revision 1 is incorporated into the Rev 2 of the board, and we have the revision tree there on the right. So now we can think about this as being sort of at the end of the design. We've got the revision of the board, Rev 2. We've incorporated Rev 1 of the axle, the changes that Kathy made. And we can kind of think about this as a final rev controlled state of the board. And let me just show you quickly what the Excel spreadsheet of that would look like. You can see that we've got the board at Rev 2. We've got the deck. That's the board assembly. We've got the deck at Rev 2. hardware is still at rev dash, and we've got rev 1 of the axle and the wheels. So we've gone down through the entire tree. Everything is set at a revision. We've snapped a revision at the top, rev 2 of the board, and we've incorporated those and frozen those because revisions are immutable. We've frozen that revision tree with that state. That's something there that kind of brings us to a controlled, static place in our design where we started at the top. Some changes were made later at a mid-level, and we incorporated that by rolling the revision at the top level again and catching all those lower revisions. So what I'd like to do now, I'm looking at the time, I'd like to go through a demonstration using OpenBOM of how we might do that exact same process in OpenBOM. Let me go ahead and do that. Okay. So here's a couple of, here's OpenBOM. I've got, in this particular case, my SB5501 is the skateboard, the top level skateboard assembly. And as we recall, it has a board, screw, and an axle. Okay. You can also see if we view this, and OpenBOM has the ability to view things in multiple levels, sort of knitted together, which is difficult in Excel. But just to give you an entire picture of what the BOM looks like, you can see we've got a board at the top level. We have a subassembly of an axle. We have 2 of those, 8 of the screw, 1 of the board. Okay. For now, we're going to spend our time at the top. We know that revisions are applied at 1 level of a bill of material. And following our flow that we had before, I'm just going to go ahead and set the revision of the deck 1. Set the revision of the screw to dash, and then there's going to be no revision for now of the axle. I'm going to go ahead and create a new revision, save new revision, save revision UI pops up, and I can see now that I have revision 1 saved. Okay. So kind of following our script that we just went through, let's open up the axle. We can think about assuming the role of Kathy right now. Kathy opens up the axle and she does a little bit of work in it, and in the end, she ends up with rev dash of the nut 1 wheel. Okay. And as we recall in our workflow, she goes ahead and saves a new revision of the axle assembly. And we see now that it also has a revision 1. Keep in mind, those are revision 1 of the axle and revision 1 of the board are separate revisions. Okay. All right, let's go back to our board assembly. We remember that Jack made a couple of changes to some hole locations. And we also remember that there's now rev 1 of the axle subassembly available. All right, let's save the revision 2. We're sitting in the board right now. Let's save revision 2 of the board. Okay. So now sitting in the board, we have what we had at the end of our workflow. We've got a for the skateboard. We have it at the various revisions. Okay. So let's go back now and just sort of ask ourselves that question that we led off with, which was, how do I tell what revisions of certain stuff is in my assembly, in my BOM? So let's go back to I'm going to use the chooser here. Let's go back to Rev 1 of the board. You recall that we were at revision 1 and revision dash, and we had no revision for the axle. Okay, we did a little work and we saved Rev 2 of the board. And Rev 2 of the board is now at revision 2 of the deck, and revision 1 of the axle. So we can see that as we save these top level revisions, we've captured the state of the BOMs that are linked, that are in the sub-level BOMs. We also captured the state, of course, of anything that happens to exist at any parts that exist at that top level. So let's say we've got a, return the latest. Let's say we've got a new design. It's going to take 16 of these screws instead of 8. I'm going to make a change to that. Let's just save another, let's say revision 3. And I submit this to my team for review, and they say, hey, what are you talking about? We aren't going to have 16 screws on this. And you say, oh, wow, maybe I need to go back to revision 2 that had just 8. So I now have the ability that I've kept these revisions. I have the ability to choose which ones I'd like to visit. I have, sort of see some history in that way. I can also, using a BOM management tool, I can also view some history specifically about particular revisions. So I can see when revisions were created and what changes were made, quantities were changed, etc. So Google Sheets has something similar. OpenBOM breaks it up for you by revision, which is nice. And I have some other features I can use about change reports and things, but plenty of videos on that. So what do I ended up with here? I have created a structure. Let's a little recap here. We've created a structure. We have gone through changes in, changed the various revisions of some of the parts as well as the sub-assemblies. And then using a save revision command at the single levels, we were able to create individual revisions that represent the state of that structure as it was that time that revision was created. So use this type of process of changing those revisions of those sub-level bills of material, creating an upper level bill of material, upper level revision for the top level bill of material, and creating that as read only. And whether if you're using a BOM tool, of course it will do it automatically for you. If you're using Excel, you just save that thing out and put it in a directory that's read only or set it to read only. And you'll end up with a history of revisions that you can work your way back through and see. You can answer that question when someone comes to you and says, hey, look, I've got Rev 3 of the skateboard in the field. What went into Rev 3? You say, well, okay, we had one board, 16 screws and 2 axles. And possibly get the same question about, I've got a Rev 1 out there. What was the build on Rev 1? I said, well, this was the build on Rev 1. We didn't have the axles weren't released yet. Okay, well, I hope that was helpful. Let's just return back to the deck here. We got I'm running right on time. We got a few minutes left. So I'm going to share this with you. Here's some references I'd like to point out. A couple of key webinars that I in the past that I find interesting, and some other additional reading. And there's a nice video down here at the bottom from Oleg, our CEO, on revisions. So with that, I'd like to take any questions Okay, okay. Let's see. Uh, yeah, I think the question was, how would I tell what revision was in if I had a revision, 3 of a part, and way up at the top level, I had a revision, 5. How would I tell what revision the part was in? I think we demonstrated that by saving those revisions at the top level, you will, in making them read over, you'll capture the state of the revisions of the lower subassemblies as well as the parts. We didn't dive into how to revise parts, but the lower bombs and parts. And by the way, I use kind of bombs and assemblies interchangeably. They both mean, in this context, they both refer to the same thing. Okay, and how are revisions of the parts controlled? Well, I didn't dive into that, and there's lots of different ways to do that. I realized for this webinar, I just sort of took the approach that a miracle happens and the part has a revision. There are many ways to do it within your organization. You may have a change control board, or you may have a process or a team or somebody that handles that. So I don't recommend one or the other than just to if you're developing a process and we do a little research, there's a lot of available information online about recommended methods and things on how to do that. There's also a few webinars that I've done about form, fit, and function, and some other things that may help you determine when a revision is needed. You see the webinar playlist for that. Okay. All right, listen, thank you. I want to thank everyone for attending. We'll share this information out today or tomorrow, and we love to hear from you at support@openbom.com. My name is Steve Hess, Director of User Experience at OpenBOM. Enjoy the day. Bye-bye.